You don't have to agree with riots to be able to understand them. If politicians dealt with mass, uncontrolled immigration, they wouldn't have to deal with riots. We are bracing now for a fourth night of protests in Northern Ireland. The establishment media, the police, many politicians are just trying to pass it all off as far-right racist bigotry.
This violence is racism, pure and simple racism, with the police left to deal with the outworkings of societal unrest. It is truly a sad reflection of our society that people are putting identifiers on their front doors in the hope of escaping attack. The Chief Constable has assured us that the police will stand to protect and will bring those responsible to justice and will attempt to prevent where they can. But the real prevention work lies in the hands of others.
OK, so if you look at the left-wing Independent newspaper, you have to scroll quite a long way down their website before you get this line in the article that's got the headline, "What is behind those riots?" So it goes, "The unrest started after a peaceful protest on Monday, which was organised in support of the family of a girl who was the victim of an alleged sexual assault in the area. In connection with the incident, two 14-year-old boys have appeared in court charged with attempted rape. The charges were read to the teenagers by a Romanian interpreter." Now, I want to make a few things very, very clear. Firstly, this is an active case. Nothing has been proven and everyone is innocent until proven guilty. I also have no doubt that some people are racist, and I do not condone the behaviour like things like just setting random foreigners' homes on fire or attacking police officers like this. But here's a radical idea, OK? Now, hear me out on this. If politicians did what everyone keeps voting for, like stopping mass legal and illegal immigration and putting a bit of a brake on rapid demographic change, and this is the kicker now, treating new arrivals better than they treat the natives, then they wouldn't be dealing with situations like we're seeing in Northern Ireland. Now, according to the Home Office data, foreigners are 3 times as likely to be arrested for sex offences in Brits. Those aren't my figures, that is official figures. Authorities did try to cover up the Pakistani rape gang's inquiries because they didn't want to stoke racial tensions, and we know that because that came out in official inquiries. It's not just about women and girls, though, is it? We have had cases like this man who travelled through 13 different countries to get to Britain, where he was given free housing before he murdered a pensioner on the street. Look, normal, everyday people are being told not to believe what they can see with their own eyes. They're being told that they're racist if they say out loud that they feel a bit less safe because of increasing levels of crime. They're called a far-right racist thug if you make the point that importing large numbers of people from societies that have different values can put women and girls at risk. But then you see things like this.
Yeah, go on, lad. Just watch him.
Now, that was a group of ethnic minority men attacking a police station. Does the Prime Minister or the left-wing press really call them radicals? I didn't see it happening at the time. What's happening in Ballymena and other towns in Northern Ireland needs to stop. People need to stop burning things down, attacking police officers, all of that stuff. But the point here for me is this. It's not a mystery as to why it's happening. And I do think this is a reaction to a mess that our politicians created. We're joined now by GB News reporter Dougie Beattie, who is in Ballymena for us. So, Dougie, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Gosh, you're standing out in the rain, unless, of course, you have been victim to one of the police water cannons. But what's going on where you are?
Patrick, this is Portadown. It's not Ballymena. And tonight, Portadown has kicked off. There's about 400 rioters into the streets here behind us. That started after a protest in the centre of town that was anti-immigration. And really, you talk about the left-wing media. I have got to say, spending the last 3 days in Ballymena and wandering those streets, no one, and I mean no one in the left-wing media, has mentioned that in those streets, right in the centre of the town, there was brothels, there was drugs, there was illegal immigrants going in there. That's what those people in that city, our town, had to put up with, and the media are totally ignoring that whole process. And tonight, what we're seeing kicking off here is exactly the same thing, only now in Portadown. and people have had enough. And joining me now is Jonny Buckley. Jonny is the DUP MLA for this area. Jonny, what's happening?
Well, firstly, Dougie, and I think it's right from the very outset, I want to condemn wholeheartedly the violence that has happened across our streets over this past few days, and indeed here tonight in Portadown. There's absolutely no doubt there is significant concerns among the Northern Ireland population about the very issues of immigration that you have raised, but violence solves nothing. In fact, it shows a breakdown of the political class to actually grasp with this issue. There is an absolute certainty among the people of Northern Ireland that consecutive UK governments, whether they be Labour or the Conservatives, have failed this country in their border policy, which has inflicted upon the United Kingdom vast swathes of uncontrolled immigration and indeed in many cases illegal immigration. That's the real issue at the heart of what's going on our streets right now, but I'm appealing for calm, because violence does not help propel this message to the government. Violence only serves to further heighten tensions and inflict pain upon those locals that have to live in these communities.
Yeah, well, that's all very well saying that, Jonny, but I mean, we've been looking at these mayors groups and groups that are actually hiring houses. So when you go to hire a house or rent a house, you're competing against the government for the lease of that house, and then that puts the price of the houses up. Why can you not control that here in Northern Ireland?
It's a multifaceted issue, the issue of immigration, and you're correct, because there's cultural issues, there's social issues, there's housing issues, and indeed there's wider public pressure issues as a result of uncontrolled and in some regards illegal immigration. You mentioned mayors. There's very few journalists who want to talk about the issue of mayors. But if Sir Keir Starmer thinks that the UK public are that stupid that they believe because he's cracking down on immigrant hotels, that they're not wise to the fact being that mayors and other groups in the United Kingdom are housing these asylum seekers in housing across the UK and pushing local rents up, that's only causing further escalation of tensions in local communities.
All right, Jonny, thank you very much. So this is due to go on pretty much into the night. There is a lot of young men in here that unfortunately their lives will be ruined with criminal records. But because of the state, 85% of mayors' properties are in socially deprived areas. And that means areas, the working classes here in the likes of Portadown. So we've seen trouble in Ballymena. Larne last night, they burnt a leisure centre. Coleraine, Belfast, North Belfast, West Belfast. And tonight it's in Mid-Ulster. This is getting out of control. And anybody can say anything they want on the left, but they have got to address this problem, and that is just a journalistic view on this, Patrick, from being on the ground and talking to the people on the ground. It's not racist, it is factual.
Well, it's also very timely, given, actually, dare I say, what we were talking about at 9 p.m. on this show, about if it's all very well and good, the government here on the mainland, as it were, saying that they're going to shut down migrant hotels. We were posing the question, where are they going to go? Well, it looks like in Northern Ireland we've had a little look at what that might mean, and unfortunately it's not gone particularly well. But Dougie, in Portadown, where you are at the moment, you mentioned that it had kicked off a bit. Can you just describe to us exactly what has gone on so far, please?
Well, there's been one arrest. There's been 9 plastic bullet rounds. Those rounds we talked about last night already fired. One man was hit 3 times with them. And why I'm standing here away from the TSG, those Land Rovers, those snatched Land Rovers you can see there, is because they have brought the dog units out. And unfortunately, Patrick, dogs can't read a media pass. So when they go down that street, if we happen to be standing there, we'll be right in the middle of it. So water cannon, not a problem. Baton rounds, not a problem. But dogs, definitely not at this stage of the game. And these units here will go in after the dogs, and then they will try to snatch as many riders as they can on the way through. But this is only really causing real pressure on the Northern Ireland Executive, and it is causing real pressure on the taxpayer of Northern Ireland, because things like leisure centres being burnt should not happen. That means that the likes of Larne is without a leisure centre. It was a totally stupid policy. They shouldn't have done it, and these people here shouldn't be wrecking their own society. But unfortunately, they think they're not being heard, and their politicians are not listening to them.
Well, Dougie, thank you very much. You've been doing absolutely incredible stuff for us on the ground over there for the last few days. I do hope that we might be able to go back to you a little bit later on, but of course, got to be safety first as well. Dougie, thank you. Dougie Beattie there, GB News reporter It was in Ballymena not Ballymena, Portadown. It's my fault again. I'll get that right one day. Anyway, let's get thoughts from my panel. We've got journalist Emily Sheffield, Tory peer Lord Bailey, and political commentator Fahima Mohammed. Emily, what do you make of what we're seeing going on now across Northern Ireland? You know, is it a case of you don't agree with it, but you can kind of understand it?
It's tricky because I've just been doing a bit of research into sort of what's going... Because he's talking a lot about what's going on underneath, isn't he? He's talking about the undercurrents and why this pressure's built up there. There's actually relatively low unemployment in Portadown. Wages are fairly steady there. So there's got to be a sort of feeling of, like, frustration of choices. It's got a manufacturing... It's got a manufacturing background of jobs, but there's actually a lot of new life and sciences moving in there. There's a very diverse employment. So as he was saying, that there's this sort of bubbling feeling of their community feeling broken up in some way by migrant populations coming in. And this was specifically aimed at the Roma, which is where it started in Ballymena. And then, we don't know much about the case, but, it looks like they're Romanian. So we don't even know if this is from the same community. Romanian and Roma are not necessarily the same.
Well, quite.
So, you know,
okay.
it's kind of extraordinary. It's always young men, though. So what I would focus in these riots is what are the frustrations that are building?
There's a number. So you played the VT of the police officer saying it's racism, pure and simple. It's definitely racism, but it isn't simple, and that's the point, isn't it? You know, two things. Why it's always young men is because young men are militant for their community. So if your community is feeling a particular way, if your community arrives on the street, it's normally in the form of young men. You talk about the levels of employment in that area. That's irrelevant if you're from the part of that community that's doing poorly. No, London is the richest place in Europe, probably. There's a lot of people who are doing very, very badly. So if you have the riot, it is well staffed. The point I'm trying to make is if people... 400
people's a lot, then, Portadown,
that's a big...
That's quite a sizable... And social media will be having its effect as well.
Social media. But if politicians and journalists... Here's the key thing. And journalists don't acknowledge some of the feelings of those communities, then it will grow. Because it's linked to their change in pace. What does it mean?
And that's why I was trying to look at... I wonder if some of these... You know, manufacturing was the big employer there. Are these the men that are not moving into the new social sciences that are coming in? They feel left behind, they feel left out. And then there's this feeling of frustration and unfairness when they see other people they think coming in to take their jobs. And then it's about a sort of tinder, isn't it? It just takes something to blow it all up.
Indeed. Pima, I'll bring you in. So can you understand why some people feel incredibly frustrated at maybe they've voted consistently for things like lower immigration, they've voted consistently for better law and order and all of that, and they've not got it, and then there are flashpoints or incidents, we're not going to go into the specifics of this alleged case in Ballymena, but there can be flashpoints and then frustration comes out. Where are you on that?
I work within the criminal justice system and I work with probation officers and police officers. And as far as I'm concerned, there should be no one justifying or even understanding other criminals being a threat and using excuses as migrants or other criminals for that behaviour. That is absolutely abhorrent, and I cannot believe we can sit here and even try to justify those kind of acts, which is destroying. We have the police, we've got, loads of people.
Justify it, by the way, we've all made completely
I'm just saying in general, no one's saying that. But the fact that we are questioning, can you let me finish? We are trying to understand here why they might feel like this. Come on, they are also criminals doing criminal things.
If you don't understand it, and if you don't address it...
Yeah, but you don't act in that way. You would not understand criminals if you don't act in that way. To be honest...
Can I say something? I've edited the Evening Standard. There are young kids, and we were just discussing how a young kid got stabbed by 3 other young kids in London. We absolutely try and look at why those 3 14-year-olds went and stabbed that other child.
I work in rehabilitation and we do look at that, but that's still not an excuse for you to say...
It applies to everything with
No, you don't compare apples and pears here, OK? At the same time, what I'm trying to say is you cannot justify criminal acts of these people to say that they have a reason. Yes, you can understand that. Yes, you can go and understand what might be the reason for it.
Justifying it.
just say something? I've been in community work for over 38 years, been in politics for probably 25 at this point. Let me make it very clear to you. You absolutely have to understand where they're coming from, because if you don't, you will get a repeat, and you'll get multiple repeats. And when you're talking about civil unrest at this level, it will grow. So journalists, politicians, school teachers, police officers, and those individuals involved need to understand where it came from in order to answer the question. It is not good enough just to tell those people they're racist. Yes, they are, but that is not the answer. Telling someone they're racist means they'll just accept it and go more.
If they are specifically saying things that say that they are racist, then fine. No one's saying we shouldn't understand where this comes from. That, for me, understanding is also the lack of leadership. Understand where these problems stem from shouldn't be an excuse for racism or criminal activity.
I do wonder if Emily, I'll put this to you, which is that when you do see people behaving in a way that anyone watching this will think, you shouldn't go burning down leisure centres or putting bricks through people's windows.
No, I mean, definitely not.
Just in
children and families. Centre.
People get that, right? People get that. But then, because some people do that, then what you get is, in my view, quite stupid law enforcement or sometimes politicians that go... So what he said... All of these things are far right and racist. Well, in amongst those people, you will have people who have got genuine fears and genuine negative experience about what Dougie Beattie was saying from his own experience on the street there. You know, brothels popping up, crime popping up, drug dealing popping up in a way that the locals apparently feel is disproportionately represented by new arrivals to the area. And I think they use the words racism and far right to try to stop any discussion about that, maybe, Emily.
Well, I think then the point is that they should be cracking down on those elements. There are
that is a frustration, of
criminal
course.
Gangs, and that is a problem. But at the same time, if people are feeling, and it should be backed up by data, by the way, and again, this is authorities should be being clear and honest, then people are going to start blaming and looking for people.
The authorities can't be clear and honest because it's laziness on their part. To just say people are racist is fine. They've answered the question, they're racist. That's why I behave that way. It goes deeper than that. And remember, if you keep calling people far right who are not far right, they start to believe they are, and you fuel the group, you grow the group. Yeah. We saw it with the comments that Keir Starmer made earlier in the year. Somebody needs to go into that community and make an understanding of why they're behaving that way.
We've got to go. Sorry. We're way over. We took Dougie for a long time to stop that. So, look, coming up.